All right, guys, thank you for joining us today. So, as you guys can see here, for those of you that know, this is Cold War Prepper. You could probably only imagine why he calls himself Cold War Prepper, but I'm going to have him answer for yourself. So, why did you pick that name, Cold War Prepper?
Well, I'm kind of on the septuagenarian side. And so I started my prepping journey in 1962. My house was just a couple miles off the end of the runway for Biggs Air Force Base. Now it's Biggs Army Airfield, but it was B-36s and B-52s that answered the call for the Cuban Missile Crisis. And my next door neighbor was a civil defense warden for the block, and he built one of those cinder block fallout shelters in his backyard. So I was a young, impressionable 10, 11-year-old kid and just soaked up as much as I could and got into prepping and stayed with it ever since then.
Wow, nice. Um, Hammer AZ, thank you for the donation. Now, I have to ask you, did you get to hang out in that, that bunker a lot, or was it just for.
We built it, and then about 6 months after we built it, then my parents bought a house over closer to the uh, aircraft control tower for El Paso International Airport.
Ah, okay.
As a matter of fact, if you take where I grew up and then make a triangle, and 1 mile on one leg to the high school I graduated from, and then 1 mile down on both legs to the third point of the triangle is the Walmart where they had the big shooting here a couple of years ago.
Hmm. Very interesting. That's it. That's actually interesting. What you call it. So, I have to say you definitely served, right?
Oh yes, 21 years, 6 months, and 13 days.
Oh shit, I can barely remember how many years I did as a fireman. You got it down to the months. So, what was the branch? What was the service? The branch. Sorry,
I was Army intelligence.
Army intelligence. So, okay, all right, very good. Now, being that you were okay, so you're older than most of us. You remember the Cold War and the bullshit that went on back then. Do you think we are closer to nuclear war, or do you think this is all people being a little overboard?
I think history repeats itself, and we're getting very, very close to that teeter totter going to the other direction that we don't want it to go. But since my all 21 years I was working against the Soviet Union, um, I have a little bit of faith that Господин Putin has a little bit more sanity and a little bit more rationality than do, say, the Ayatollah or Kim Jong Un. Those two scare me. If we're going to have a nuclear war, I think that one of those two will start it. I think Xi Jinping and I think Господин Putin both are going to be a little bit more cautious in trying to start something that can escalate beyond their control.
And that's what I was thinking. Again, I thought that um, through my years of following Putin and doing some research on it. Um, I was like, yeah, he doesn't. But then again, I mean, when people get older, they sort of lose their sanity. I'm not saying all older people, but you just see it. You see it in your friends. You see it in time, and some of the things he's saying and doing, it doesn't make sense. That being said, you are right about at the very least North Korea. I mean, both countries actually, but North Korea. I mean, the guy's. I think he's feeling left out. I think he wants more recognition. That's why he's lobbing these duds, if you will, over Japan.
Mhm.
So I mean, I don't know. I don't know how bad it's going to get either. But being that you were around it and you that was your wheelhouse, you would know more than us in regards to that anyway.
No, and we talk here along a bilateral uh, thing, nuclear war or EMP, and I think he would use EMP before he would nuclear, in the sense of a nuclear detonation, either a surface burst or an air burst. But even before those two, and I think we're seeing the precursor of it now at the airports and at the banks and other places, is I think he's going to use cyber attack before he even goes the EMP route. There's so much damage he can do through cyber. Shutting down the airports, shutting down their electrical grid, our transportation system. if you take a look at a coal burning plant, and we still have 20% of our electricity is produced by coal burning plants, that has to have a train load of coal every day to keep them running at 100% capacity. And if you just delay one of those trains, somebody goes without electricity. And I think our system is so fragile that delaying a couple of trains and we can have a grid failure like you would not believe. So I think cyber, which is pretty much undetectable compared to an EMP or a nuclear launch, might be the preferred way to go.
It's interesting you said cyber because Let's Talk Prepping, Linda over at Let's Talk Prepping, she was talking about that. I think it was today, maybe it was yesterday, but she had a video and she talked about it. And she said that the airports were hit the other day in one of the articles. And there wasn't much on the news, but when you, I guess, dive deeper on the internet, you find out that they had technical issues in their airports. I know LaGuardia, she said, was one, but I couldn't remember the other two that she mentioned. But
Hartsfield and Newark.
okay, thank you. You said Kirksfield,
Hartsfield in
Hartsfield,
Atlanta.
in Atlanta. Okay, and then wow, that's three different airports in three very different locations. Well,
Yeah,
Newark and LaGuardia are fairly close, but Atlanta, that's pretty far off to pick that one. Oh, okay, yeah. So, like I said, what's interestingly enough, I'll get a lot of my news like that from either her or Pinball, and then there are a couple other people I follow as well.
I like Greg from NY Prepper.
Yes,
He does
Greg's
he
another
does a
one.
pretty good job of researching his stuff before he puts it out.
Right with the whole Ukraine thing. I follow him on that as well. Yeah, listen, man, there's just so many things going on. It there are preppers out there as you know that have channels that they talk about so many things and they they go about the roundabout ways of making it sound like they're the first ones to report it or what you call them. Like it's impossible. I mean, like
Yeah,
I keep I mean I try to keep my finger on the pulse here in New York City, and even then I miss some shit. My wife's up at night. She'll read some shit in the morning. She'll tell me certain things that happen. I'm like, no shit. So I mean, like it's impossible for all of us to keep our finger on the pulse with everything going on. But again, but for those that do, who are way better at it than I am, that's who I follow and that's who I listen. And then of course I do research just in case. Go ahead.
I don't even try. I'm totally focused on what are the solutions should something happen. So I've got great sources. You, Pinball, NY Prepper, Prepper Dog. I mean, I've got some great sources who feed me good information, and I can rely on that. So then I just look for the solutions.
That's the thing. That's why I listen to other people. I'm like, all right, if this happened, this is what we're going to do. So now somebody just was asking, sorry, if you have a Patreon.
No, I don't.
No, you don't. Okay.
No.
Yeah. Neither do I. Whoever asked that question, I dumped Patreon after some bullshit they pulled with a couple of YouTubers. So same thing with PayPal right now. I'm waiting for one more payment to come in, and then I'm getting rid of my PayPal account for that BS they pulled the other day. Even though they apologized, that was whatever. So this is a more interesting. I find this question, at least for me, a little more interesting. And I'm not like singling you out, but because you guys are older, what made you start a YouTube channel?
I had a Facebook channel, and then I had a company, and my company was Prepper Center of America, and I had that for about 8 years. And then I closed it down. I got offered a real good job with an electric power company as their HR director. So I took that and shut down the Prepper Center of America. And then I changed everything over to Facebook. And so I did Facebook for about 8 years. And then Facebook kicked me off. I still don't know why, but I got kicked off Facebook. And when I asked them why I was kicked off, they said, because you disagreed with us kicking you off in the first place.
It's
So,
like that wasn't me.
so I wanted to find another venue, and I just moved over to YouTube back in January or February.
Okay, all right. So and you've been on for a little bit. Yeah. The comment sections is just funny sometimes. Sorry. Yeah, it's. I just found it interesting, but you've been on for a long time. So Facebook, like you were doing a lot of videos on Facebook.
Yes. And then a lot of articles as well. So, on my website that I had at that time, Prepper Center of America, I had all kinds of articles and checklists and stuff on how to cook in an emergency situation. And it, I just shut it down after I went to work for the power company
So,
and lost it. So,
oh, I was gonna say, how come you just don't bring all that stuff back onto here? You know,
yeah,
wouldn't be a bad
would
idea.
would have loved to have.
You could do it over again anyway, right?
Oh yeah,
Figure. I mean, there's a couple videos I was gonna re-upload, re-upload from my old channel, and I looked at it. And I'm like, well, I'm a lot younger, a lot thinner. I'm like, nope, I'm not gonna do that. Just do the video all over again. Fuck it. Um, so, with that being said, the nuclear war EMP. You said that you think it's more likely to be an EMP after a cyber attack.
and if you take a look at it, we're destroying ourselves from within. So, and Mr. Putin knows exactly what's going on inside the U.S. He's got eyes, ears. I mean, he knows exactly what we're doing to ourselves. We are so divided right now. And the election coming up. I mean, I wouldn't do anything if I were him until after the election. Let's see what happens with the election. Somebody's going to be ticked off. You talked about the possibility of a civil war. I think that this election may be one of the catalysts for that. Why waste your energy and effort to take out a country if they're going to take themselves out? And so, I think if I were him, I'd just sit back and see what we do to ourselves. We got this cold weather coming up this winter.
Right.
He's taking care of Europe by denying them the ability to heat things, and about 20-30% of their electrical production was natural gas. So, he's pretty much neutralized Western Europe, and he can do the same thing with us through either cyber attacks or EMP. So, or let us do it to ourselves.
Yeah, I feel like you're right. I do feel like we're definitely listen. We're crushing and collapsing under our own bullshit here. I mean, the amount of shit that comes out each day is like it's astonishing. Um, Especially, well, I found it interesting today. I'm going to talk about it a little later in the Angry Truth. But what Biden said today about, well, the Biden administration, sorry, saying that the transgender women have to sign up for selective service in case there's a draft. Interestingly enough, there was another article right behind that was talking about a draft and drafting people. So I now you might know this a little better than me, but wasn't it if you were the only son in a family, you weren't allowed to be drafted, or that not that you weren't allowed, but you didn't have to. You didn't have to be drafted.
Only surviving son.
Only surviving son. Right.
Right. So like I was an only son,
Right.
but and I got my draft notice in 1970.
Okay.
But and I would have been drafted. But it's the only surviving son is if you've lost a sibling in combat and you're the last one with the family name, then you don't get drafted.
Okay. And what if you're the first son, but the only son with in the family? Wasn't
That's
that
like I was. That's exactly the situation I was in, and I got drafted.
okay? So right, because now they I guess they reminded everybody if you go to Select Services Twitter account, I think a day or two ago, they posted something about even if you're the last son that carries the family's name, something or another, you have to sign up for a draft. And
Right.
I'm like, why the hell did they put that out there? So that was a couple of days ago. Then they followed it up with trans women who are men pretending to be women. They have to sign. They have to sign up as well. But trans men who are women pretending to be men, they don't have to sign up. So if you're a biological woman or a biological man has to sign up for the select service. Biological woman who's pretending to be a guy doesn't. It's really confusing.
Right. Right.
I mean, it's not that confusing, but it's what you call it. It's stupid. So now one has to ask: are they considering draft? And if they are considering the draft, what the hell's headed our way that's going to make them even start talking about it?
Well, it depends on how the war goes. If it's going to be a conventional war, then we might use a draft. If it's going to be either an EMP or a cyber war or a nuclear war, we don't have time. Um, let's go back to my when I got drafted. I didn't open the letter. I went down and to the recruitment center. I said, "Do I have any options?" He said, "Is it still sealed?" I said, "Yes." Gave me a whole bunch of tests. Said, "Come back tomorrow." I went back the next day. They had this guy bending over a 55-gallon oil drum, and he's wearing one of those silver suits, and it blew him about 15 feet. He took his helmet off and said, "You too can be explosive ordnance disposal." And I said, "No, I can't. I want a job where I'm allowed to make one mistake." And so
Nice.
so this next guy came in civilian clothes. And he said, "We'll take you." And I said, "What will I do?" He says, "I can't tell you." And I said, so I asked him a whole bunch of questions. He kept saying, "I can't tell you." I said, "What can you tell me?" He says, "Number one, you've got 1 year of training minimum, more than likely 2 years. Number two, um, you're going to be occasionally in civilian clothes. And number three, there's none of us in Vietnam." I said, "I'll take it." He says, "You got 2 year obligation. You got a 4 year obligation for 2 years of school." I said, "Okay, that's fine. I'll do that." And so that's how I began a 21-year career in intelligence, and it was a great decision. But in order to do that, I went to 8 weeks of basic training in Fort Leonard Wood, basic combat training. Then I went to 47 weeks of language school at Monterey, California. Then I went to 8 weeks of basic intelligence school at Goodfellow Air Force Base in Texas. Then I went to another 37-week course at the National Security Agency at Fort Meade, Maryland. So I had 2 years of school before I was ever sent out into the field.
Damn.
Now we don't do it that way anymore. We have what they call on OSUT, or one station unit training. So if we take what used to be, or what the key to the Army is the 11 Bravo, or the infantryman. That's the heart of the Army. So he would go to basic training with me, 8 weeks in basic combat training, and then they'd ship him off to Fort Benning, and he'd go through another 8 weeks of advanced individual training. Well, they've shortened all that down to 12 weeks. He just goes straight to Fort Benning for basic training and individual training. So now they have to have a little bit more advanced notice that you're coming in, so that they can do all the training and tell you which place you're going to go to for your MOS. They used to have an 8 week lag time while you're in basic combat training to determine what you were going to do, and then send you off to that school. You didn't know until the day you graduated. Uh, but now they got to tell you before they even send you off to basic training. So I don't know how it's the selective service system has not changed, but the basic combat training and advanced individual training have changed. So I don't know how they're going to meld those two together.
Oh shit. I mean, yeah, it's funny because not funny, but it's interesting that they're talking about draft, and I'm like, well, I'm too old, but I'm like, fuck. My son is he'll be 24. What's this, October? The end of the month, he'll be 24, and then he has one more year, and I guess he's done. So, but that's the thing. I don't think a lot of people want their kids to be drafted. If this is something that we're looking to go overseas and fight with, this is not the war that people want to fucking be in on. Just because it's bullshit on all sides. Like this is clear bullshit on all sides.
Yeah, they're saying that they expect us to be, this to be totally resolved by the end of the year. Well, if that's the case, if a basic combat infantryman takes 12 weeks to train, we're getting pretty close to that 12-week mark now, to where if we start training them today, they won't even be trained by the time the war's over.
Well, didn't during the draft, didn't they shorten training because of that?
Well, they did. So it was 8 weeks of basic combat training and 8 weeks of infantry training,
All right,
and that included 4 weeks of jungle training. So back in the '70s, early
back in the '70s.
'70s.
Okay, all right, yeah, I could. So I remember hearing that. I mean, again, that was in like books I read and movies, and they all said they so if they were to draft now, they would shorten training. But um, I find it interesting that if kids today are stupid, and I think they need all the fucking training they can get. So shortening anything, in this day and age is like detrimental. So it would be interesting. Listen, if my son was to get drafted for this bullshit, I don't know. I would try something. I just don't know what. Like because fighting for Biden is not the war, and not for nothing. But this guy's going to be sitting pretty, and we're going to be, they're going to be sitting pretty, and we're sending our kids in for this bullshit. No way.
Well, the best advice I can give you is have them do extremely well on the entrance testing. The special technical, especially if he can do very well in that, he's going to have a higher skilled job.
Right.
and most of those higher skilled jobs are not combat arms.
Okay.
And so the better he does on the testing, the further away from the front lines he'll be.
All right. That's all right. I'll consider that. So somebody was saying that the war is not going to be over by the end of the year, and I'm saying this to whoever said that. He's not saying that it is. He's saying that they say that's what it is. That's what he's reading, and that's what he's hearing. Not that he's saying that. It's not. I mean, listen. The truth be told, I don't see it ending anytime soon.
I
Uh,
don't see it happening.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm not so sure it's going to happen in the very near future. Like I said, I think Putin's smart enough where he's going to let us dig our own grave.
Yeah, you're right. We're definitely doing that for fucking sure. That's without a doubt. Um, listen, I mean, with that, the if we were to go to well, let's go nuclear war first. Let's start there and then move down to EMP. If we were to go into that realm, if that was to happen, uh, being that you were, in and you know a little more about this than a lot of us on here, uh, what would be the key points that they would strike first and hit?
Well, there's a lot of bad information out there, and
Okay.
number one, I would get Skousen's book. Skousen has a fantastic book, and he talks about what he believes is going to be the key targets in the U.S.
Disgusting.
and I would go with that. But a lot of the things that we think are going to be key targets, or a lot of that the civilians think are not. I don't think they're going to waste a nuke on Fort Hood. I mean, that's a maneuver division. And so you're wasting a nuke on tanks and armored personnel carriers that aren't going to affect you anytime in the next 3 months, moving from Fort Hood to be into a battle zone where they can impact you. You're going to use your nukes on things that can immediately either affect your uh, ability to conduct warfare,
Okay.
or that you think are going to cause such a detriment to the country that it would cause capitulation. Now, if you look back at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we just wanted to show we can wipe you out with bombs
Right.
and get you on your knees, and you're going to beg for the end of the war. So if they do that here, that means they're going to go for strategic targets, our silos that have our nuclear capabilities, that launch capabilities. Are going to go for Minot, North Dakota, and Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. They're going to go for Dyess Air Force Base here in Texas. That's our strategic bomber headquarters or bases. We're going to go for the nuclear submarine bases.
Yeah.
Then after that, possibly some population centers or some command and control centers. The Pentagon, um, NORAD, things like that.
Okay.
And but just to say they're going to willy nilly toss nukes, I don't think it's going to happen.
Willy nilly toss nukes. Yeah, that they don't want to waste the arsenal. No, and it's funny because that makes sense. And there was a list I was looking at, and it went where they would hit first. And people seem to think New York is like the first place they hit. Now, there's two stories I hear with that. One side is that they would hit New York because it's the financial hub of the world. Everything comes in and out of Wall Street for the most part, so they would strike that, but that in turn would damage everything financially, including them. So there's two sides. It's like, would they waste a nuke on New York, or would they hit other places first, then secondary and tertiary hit cities? Um,
There, there's more gold in the Federal Reserve in New York City in the vaults there than there are at Fort Knox.
really?
Yeah.
Oh shit! I didn't know that. I thought it was the other way around. I knew about the one here, but I didn't know that if we helped more. But you know what though? That does make sense. So yeah, but yeah, I didn't know that. So thank you for teaching me something new. Yeah. So then I guess they would. I mean, listen. You know, again, for a lot of people on here, I'm not worried about a nuclear war. I'm just asking a hypothetical question. So before you guys start flipping out and talking about, oh my God, no, these are hypothetical questions. That's all. And more curiosity for myself and having him answer questions that I know a lot of people are curious about. That's all it is. But yeah, with that being said, as far as EMP goes, How bad do you think that would get, and how many would they set off? Because we're under this preconceived notion that it's just one. I read
That,
a
that,
go ahead.
if you put one off, say at 30,000 feet above North Dakota,
Yeah,
you've got 80% of the U.S.
80%. Okay, all
Yep.
right.
So one's enough.
Okay, all right. Well, listen, 80%. But then, what would that stretch out to? With Florida, and I mean, it wouldn't matter
Well,
because it hits a power station that feeds other states. It really doesn't matter. They know how to.
it would be a grid meltdown. And once you have grid meltdown, then you don't have the ability to do transactions with cash or check or credit card or anything else. You don't have any pumping, electricity pumping fuel. You don't have any transportation, whether it be trucks with food or produce or anything else. You don't have any butchery shops. You don't have any stockyards. I mean, the whole country goes to pot if you don't have if you don't have the grid.
Yeah, right. That does make sense. Cyber attack is going to be cyber attack. So, um, all right. And with that, does the? I mean, obviously, the United States government has a response for that. What is their response from what you think? What do you think is going to be their response after that? Is it going to be consolidate and keep the continuity of the government going and let the people die off, or are they going to try to help the people?
Well, I think if you take a look at it, all of the military equipment it has some EMP protection. So you've got military equipment that's going to have good protection and it'll be able to be used. They don't have enough MRE stocked to take care of the country over time. And we're going to see a repeat of Katrina, basically.
On a large scale.
And, and yeah, and maybe even what we saw with Sandy. I mean, the devastation is going to be so great that there is no government capability to manage that. And with food, water, the one that scares me that nobody talks about is sanitation and hygiene.
Oh,
The dysentery and cholera and typhus and typhoid, and that's I am more afraid of that than the lack of food.
yes. Especially if you live in a city like New York, and you live surrounded by animals. Yeah, if that shit goes down, that's a major concern. I mean, listen, the wife knows if there was an EMP to go off and we identified it as such, we're beating feet. There's certain things that you can, sanitation wise, you can deal with, but you're gonna have people like, for example, shitting in the floors in the corner of their bathroom, and then after a while, what does that do? That seeps down into the walls and the fucking through the
Yep,
floors
yep.
and the ceiling. So, and if they're pissing there too, that creates the same problem.
And
Um,
it's going to attract rodents and insects, and I
right.
mean,
Yes. It goes from like this to that becomes a nuclear situation in itself.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, and I tell people that all the time. They're like, "What about?" I'm like, "Yeah, you could shit in a bucket all day. You can have all the dirt you want, but if your neighbors are fucking shitting and pissing on the floor because they can't get it in the toilet anymore, the toilet starts to back up because the system becomes compact with shit. Because where else is it gonna go, right? The
right,
sewer system,
right.
if nothing is flowing, it's gonna wind up backing into the system. So I said that's the one reason why you leave. That alone. But anyway, with that, so now do you think if we were, again, guys, hypothetically speaking, if you were to go to nuclear war, would it be total annihilation or would it be tit for tat kind of deal?
Well, let's divide this up into three subsets. So the
Okay.
first subset we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about tactical nukes. So up until 1987, 1987, we got rid of what we called area denial munitions. So we were afraid that the 20 divisions of the group of Soviet forces, Germany, were going to come across in three different arrows. Up north across the North German plains, the British area of the Rhine. Across the middle, we had the Fulda Gap, the famous Fulda Gap, and that was defended by Fifth Corps. Down south, we had the Hof Gap, which was defended by Seventh Corps. And so what we did was we had these backpack nukes. They were like 1/4 of a kiloton of explosives. So what we do with those backpack nukes was we'd say, where are the channels that the enemy is going to be coming through? We'd throw those down on the ground. Now, remember, now you have the fireball in contact with the earth. So when it blows, it's going to have a lot of uh, fallout. So you irradiate this area. Now, what that means is if the enemy is going to attack through it, they have to button up. They have to get into what we call MOP gear, military-oriented protective posture, which is a really heavy chemical suit. You don't want to wear that in Iraq. I can guarantee you that. Gas mask, everything else. Go through the contaminated area, then decontaminate. And while you're in your suit and buttoned up inside your AFV or tank, your fuel division goes from 120 degrees down to about 60 degrees.
Right.
So you're wide open to side flank attacks, surprise flank attacks. So you use tactical nukes in a defensive situation, not necessarily in an offensive situation. So if he's going to use offensive tactical nukes, he's got to go for pain centers. That's what I call them. He's going to go for Kyiv. He's going to go for Kharkov or someplace like that, where he's just basically trying to change the will of the people to where they just subjugate themselves to him. And those are going to be air bursts. They aren't going to be surface bursts. Now, that's the other two we need to talk about. Is the difference between a surface burst, where the fireball actually makes contact with the earth and it throws all that earth up in the air. That becomes your fallout. If you have an air burst where the ball of the explosion does not make contact with the earth, then you have minimum fallout. It's going to have a little bit of fallout, but it's going to be minimized compared to the surface bursts. So I think that what's going to happen is you're going to have all these air bursts. You're going to try to take care of demolishing buildings, killing people, minimum residual radiation, kind of like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where we had air bursts on both of those. And they were reoccupied within 2 weeks. So, that's what you want to do. Same thing if we have, Let's Play Global War or whatever that movie was called back in the 80s. Then what they're going to do is they want our resources. They want everything we have. And so they're not going to contaminate it. They're not going to do a whole bunch of ground bursts. They're going to do all air bursts, in my opinion. And that's just my opinion.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of fucking sense, actually, that they would resort to that than ground, because ground is just way too devastating. And yeah, you were talking about war games, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting that actually that's actually good. So now it's funny, everything you mentioned about the mop suits and stuff. Again, in the fire department, I never trained on it, but I worked with a unit that when you got detailed to them, if they had to put mop suits on, I wasn't the guy because I wasn't trained to do it. But they went over the steps of it. So when you were talking about it, I'm like, that's crazy because that was the first thing they mentioned when you get the suit on was your field of vision. Like you can't see, and then boom, and this is all you see. So you constantly have to look around when you're
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
mop suit, right? In the movies, they're wearing a mop suit and they're just walking straight ahead. They're not looking around. But they said, but when you put this thing on, you're constantly scanning as much as you can. And to boot, you're not like turning your head. You got to turn your whole body just to look in, whatever direction.
Yep.
Again, I thought that was interesting that you brought it up. But the one thing, again, you bringing that up, is how a lot of preppers and prepper channels will tell you to buy a mop suit. And I'm like, but you have to train how to put this thing on. You know, he's got one right there.
No, this is so this is we carry these in our cars. It's a $1 poncho
Oh,
from Walmart. It's a pair of booties, painter's booties to
right,
cover your shoes. I've got some goggles that cover your eyes, an N95 mask, and then I've got a triangular bandage to put on top of the hood of your poncho to make sure it stays in place. And that's my mop suit basically, because you're just keeping the the,
debris.
the, the fallout off of you. And then you want to make sure you have a knife or a pair of scissors because you don't want to take that stuff off this way. You want to kind of cut it off and let it fall away from you. But because taking it off is just as important as ever having had it on. You
Right,
can really contaminate yourself if you take it off the wrong way.
and
And
that's
making sure you have a decontamination point. So, like we have a portable camp shower that we're going to hang on the rafters on the back porch. And we'll shower before we come back into the house after we've doffed all this stuff off.
right. 95 works. Right. So again, when channels push the stuff and they're like, "Hey, put it on," but you got to know how to take it off. Like sort of like rubber gloves. Uh,
Yep.
right? You get rubber gloves on, you touch contaminants and shit, but then you got to learn how to take them off. Some people I've watched like during the whole COVID shit when they put gloves on, they put them on, but then when they took them off, they contaminated their hands again. And I was like, what the fuck am I watching? But again, most people don't know that. That again lends to the telling people to get a mop kit, like the official ones that a certain prepper sells in his store. And you're like, are you going to show these people how to take it off? And are you going to show them how to don it and keep themselves protected from the fallout? Like, obviously there's steps to it, because if it was that easy, I think we would all be wearing one. I mean, I listen. I'm definitely going to do. I'm going to get myself one and do a video to show people how to, put it on and off, or take it on and off. But again, it's steps. It's much more than telling people to go buy some shit and then that's it. But
Oh yeah, and taking off gloves is important. If you can do the taking off gloves, I'll promote that like all get out, because most people don't know that.
no, they don't. And it's funny because I took it for granted that they did, because it made sense when you take gloves off or something where you're like, it makes sense that you don't want blood back on you or whatever contaminant it is, and so that makes perfect sense. I'm like, I took that logic in my head and I go, the rest of the world should know this. And they like
Yeah.
an idiot. I thought that, and I was like, I'm an idiot for thinking that, because look at these idiots recontaminating themselves. So it was fun watching people during the whole COVID thing contaminate the shit out of themselves and just like didn't realize it. Like wearing a rubber glove, and then they touch everything in the store, and then they get in their car and they're touching everything in their car, and then they go home and then they open the doors, they take all the shit out that they touched in the store with their gloves, but now they touched everything else. I'm like, you just contaminated your entire fucking home.
See, and we're the same way with our shoes. We do the Asian thing about shoes.
We do that here
And so
too.
when you think about it, when you're out in the street with your shoes on, you're stepping on spit and crud and gum and dog urine and feces and everything else.
Right.
And then you're packing that stuff into your house. So when we get to the front door, we kick our shoes off. We don't wear shoes inside the house.
Yeah, we do that here too. Just that, and I forgot what I stepped in something a while back, and this was at the firehouse, and then we got back to we got back to the front of the firehouse, washing our boots off, and I'm like, so then I thought about it. We're stepping in piss and shit, vomit, blood, all this shit, not all day, but enough,
Mhm.
and now we're gonna track it back into the firehouse. So I'm like, and I'm doing this, to my home, like here before I started taking my shoes off a couple years back. I was tracking this shit here, and I'm like, that makes no fucking sense. I'm like, you know what? Take everything off. Take my shoes off outside, and and then you'll limit the contaminants in your home. You know, that's
Absolutely.
the best you can do. So with that, um, as far as cyber attacks go, I'm curious to see what you think as to what they would strike first, and then how it would progressively get worse.
I think the whole theory would be the same thing as an EMP. Take out the grid, take out the power grid first, and you've got this country on its knees.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. Go after the grid. Now, what about finances? The financial system.
Well, and that's another one is that if you took out the financial system, especially if we go over to this electronically based coin system, EBCD or whatever it is, then everybody's money is electric, and if you can do it with that electric system, then all of a sudden we're in a Great Depression, and because nobody has any money and can't trace it, so
Now,
that
you
would be
brought,
almost as devastating.
you brought up Great Depression. What do you think our financial system is going to look like in the next couple of years? And do you think we're going to see depression in our lifetime?
I right now, the I see if we go back to the Great Depression and both phases, the 1929 to 1931, and then the 1931 to 1941 phases.
Right.
Uh, we say that there were a lot of things that were done. The Civilian Conservation Corps and everything else got us out of that. It wasn't. It was the full employment. We put all of our men into the military. We put all of our women into the factories. We had basically, if you use today's way of counting employment, we had 100% plus employment. And then, we were hardly paying anything. Everything was going towards war debt. We were purchasing all kinds of industrial items That's what got us out of the Great Depression. If you look at it, almost every major recession, depression we've had, we got out of it through war.
Wow.
So if we go into a recession, a Great Recession or a Great Depression, the most logical way to get us out is going to be another war. And it makes sense that they would go that route.
Yeah, that makes sense then. Why they're talking about draft and why it's starting to look like something. Not saying that that's what it is, but the dots are starting to come together a little faster than I thought. That makes sense because again, the draft thing came up recently, and I'm like, why the fuck are they talking about draft all of a sudden? And then I guess because Putin did his drafting thing over there, his was a constrict what they call it. He did that over there, but now they're talking about it here, and I find it interesting. And being that we are absolutely going to see a recession probably by next year, even though I think we're in one now. Um, Not that I think we're in one now, and they just won't say it. But I think we're going to see a true recession next year. And if we see a depression, that'd be interesting. Fucking war to get us out. But a war with Russia isn't going to end well for no one. I mean, for the
No,
Russians, it's going to be
no.
bad. But for us, it's going to be probably worse. We don't have the fighting mentality that we used to have. You know, everybody's scared. Americans, I'm talking about. Americans are a lot scareder, not a word, and Americans are also a lot softer. Whereas
Yes.
Russians, though, um, I noticed the same kind of sentiment with them and them being soft. I mean, look at how many abandoned Russia when they had to when they were called to serve.
I was watching a Russian channel, and the reporter was talking about one unit, the number of suicides, the number of desertions, and the number of people who are just trying to avoid service at all. And I mean, I think I think the state of our males and their willingness to serve is probably on par with the Russians.
Okay.
And nobody wants to serve, nobody wants to go, nobody wants to fight a war.
Right.
And if you take a look at it, we had 15 active divisions when the wall fell in 1989, and right now in the Army. And right now, we've just added another division. We've added another airborne division, the 11th Airborne Division. And so now we have a total of 8 divisions. We're at 50% of where we were in 1989, 1990. And those aren't even at full strength.
No shit. Well, I mean, they're not at full strength because a lot of guys are leaving as well. No, I mean, like,
Well, because a lot of guys are leaving and because a lot of guys aren't going in. I
right.
mean,
They're having a
and so
recruitment problem. That's for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah, they're having a recruitment problem here. It looks like Russia's having the same problem as we're watching, people leave. I like you said. I think people generally don't want to fight because the other thing is, I think this is not the war to fight. This is not something where there's true um, atrocities. I mean, yeah, Russia's claiming that Ukraine has X amount of atrocities going on or had atrocities. The Ukraine's blaming Russia for the same thing, but I don't think we see anything real to fight. Like, listen, there's some shit going on in, for example, Haiti. Haiti's got some fucking problems right now. And we're not even talking about going in there, and they're asking for help. If I'm not mistaken, the Haitian government
Yeah.
was looking for help, and we're not even invested or interested. But yet we're looking at Ukraine and Russia, looking at that shit show that seems to be all made up. Everybody's blaming somebody, but when you look at Haiti and you're like, they're asking for our help. We put their president in. Their current president was put in by the United States as well. Go figure. And he's not clearing. He's not solving the problem. So now they're
Mm.
asking for help, but we don't want to go in. And I'm like, that might be a little more worth it of a war, in the sense, not a war, but a skirmish in the sense that people are dying in the middle of the streets over this bullshit. Um, Whatever the bullshit they have going on over there is that. But
Well, I think we're still reeling from Afghanistan. When we saw how we got out of Afghanistan, a lot of people are saying, if that's the way you're going to treat us when we pull out under honorable conditions, supposedly,
right,
how are you going to treat us if we go in? And I think there's a lot of people scared just simply because of Afghanistan and the withdrawal, the way the withdrawal was handled.
Yeah, the withdrawal was handled like shit, man. I mean, listen. I'm not a military guy, but I'm looking at certain things. I'm like, that doesn't seem right. That seems really fucking off. Um, Anne Marie says, "Do we even have enough equipment and arsenal left to fight with? Because we sent it all to Ukraine." And that's the other question that's coming up now. What do you think on that? Uh,
Well, I'm going to give you two possible answers. Okay.
okay.
So the first one is, remember, we had at one time 15, 16 divisions, and now we're down to where we only have 7 or 8. So we've got an additional 7 or 8 divisions worth of equipment that's just laying around that we can use once we call everybody up. So right now it's in what we call POMCUS, which is a position trade component. In this area, you'll have a warehouse, and it has entire divisions worth of tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, and 155s and 105s and everything else that's necessary. So that's there. The equipment's there. And the other portion of that is, look at what we've done with our military since 1991. After the Iraq War, and we got involved in Afghanistan, we refocused and redesigned our army. We were no longer fighting a major ground war.
Right.
All of the equipment we have nowadays is designed against improved improved explosive devices, IEDs. And so they're higher and more susceptible to fire by a tank or an anti-tank gun or anti-tank rocket by the enemy than would a vehicle that's going to be fighting a ground war against another ground force. So most of that stuff we lost in going to count. It's going to be counter insurgency type equipment in comparison to countering another militarized, mobilized unit. So we'll have to go back to all that equipment we have. But then again, the Russians have the same thing. When they withdrew from East Germany, when the wall came down in 1989, in Group of Soviet Forces Germany, they had 20 divisions. In the Central Group of Forces Germany, in Central Group of Forces in Czechoslovakia, they had 5 divisions. In the Northern Group of Forces in Poland, they had 2 divisions. So that's 27 divisions they deactivated. They've got all that equipment there somewhere. So now all they have to do is now it may not be the most current generation of fighting equipment, but it is fighting equipment. So, I mean, they had T-64s and T-72s when I retired, and they had BMPs, BMP-2s. So they had fairly modern equipment, not the most modern, but yeah, they have all kinds of equipment. So do we.
It's funny because people keep saying, "Oh, the modern equipment." I'm like, if that equipment can still kill, it's still effective, right? So,
Oh yeah.
and that's the one thing, like when people talk about weapons and modern, I'm like, it doesn't matter. That thing can still fire. That thing can still move, or do what it's supposed to do. It's still effective. And the technology side of war right now, it seems to be the focus for everyone. China, Russia, us, UK. Everybody's focused on new technology to fight wars to save soldiers, but it's not really to save soldiers. It's actually to save money on paying out soldiers benefits if they get hurt and or family members if they get killed. I always thought that AI, for example, a fighter pilot that they put out there, they said it'll save pilots from getting shot down. Like, when the fuck was the last time a pilot got shot out of the sky? That's one. Two, it's just a money thing for them. It saves them so much money putting a robot in place or an AI in place than an actual person. Which listen, I always find to be a bullshit reason because now you're eliminating more jobs just to put a fucking machine in there just to save a couple of bucks. That's all it is. It's never about us. So with that, guys. Oh, for those of you guys that are watching, do me a favor. I know you guys are listening to this guy and hearing what he's saying, and he has been spot on with everything he has said. And he's smart to boot. He knows his shit. So do me a favor, go over to Cold War Prepper and like and subscribe to his channel. Also, while you're doing that, hit the like button on this channel or the thumbs down, whatever floats your boat. I can care less, but nonetheless, it gets the algorithm, some kind of mood. Now, what do you? We're gonna move into in your life later on. Are you retired or are you still working?
Oh no, I retired from the Army in 1991, right after we came back from Desert Storm, and then the Army was. I would recommend it as a career under the old Army, not the new one necessarily.
Okay.
But when I was in the Army, they sent me to 3 years of language school. I went to study 1 year of Indonesian language and then 2 years of Russian language. And so, I was able to pick up some fantastic language skills. That gave me a bachelor's in Russian language, a BA in Russian from the University of Maryland. Then I started working on my master's, and the Army paid for 80% of both of my masters. They also contributed 80% of most of the work, my coursework for my PhD. Then, when I retired from the Army, I had my VA benefits. I transferred those to my daughter. So she went to college on my VA benefits. And so I can't complain. The Army was really, really good as far as providing education. So I ended up with an MBA in production operations management and an MPA in human resources management. So I stayed in human resources management from the time I retired in 1991 until I finally retired back in well, I was HR director for the largest, one of the third largest homeless shelters in the U.S., the Arch in downtown Austin,
Okay.
and so I left that, bought a store, and then restarted restocking the store. It was a shipping store, and 50% of it was prepping stuff, and 50% was shipping. And I just sold that a year ago this month, a year ago the 15th of this month. So now I am totally retired.
Totally retired, huh? Was it halfway retired, almost retired, and totally retired. Very good. Listen, I mean, you definitely didn't live a dull life, that's for sure. And it's awesome that you kept on the move. You used the military to your benefit, which I know a lot of people don't do, but I also know a lot of people have done it. So that's pretty good. Actually, that's awesome. And again, thank you for your service. If I haven't said it, um, it you
Well,
know,
thank you.
it's interesting that guys like you who served and utilized the armed forces to benefit yourself, and your intelligence as well, like legitimately your intelligence, and not spew bullshit. And this is why I interview people like you because you're definitely on the ball. You're smart as shit, and you know your shit, and that's what the prepper community needs more of. They need more people like you who know. Especially, I'm gonna go on a limb and say you probably know a lot of history and very good at it as well. Um, so this is again, guys, why I like interviewing different preppers because you come across some, and guys like him, they fucking nail it every time. Fantastic, yes, thank you, sir. So a lot of people are liking or liking, sorry, this live stream. Listen, this is pretty fucking good. Holy shit, the fucking spam milkshakes. Anyway, yeah, it's just it's one or the other. It's either people are breaking my balls with spam here, or I go to the supermarket and it's fucking stacked high. Everything else is missing, but the spam is just there. It's like it's never.
Yeah, but I saw that Greg took care of the spam for you.
Yeah, that was a good video. Fucking annihilated this can. I was like, damn. And the way it shattered, I was like, oh man, that's really good. But the prepper side of me was like, shit, that's fucking, that's meat. You
There's
could have
12
gave
days
to,
worth of food.
yeah, you
Yeah.
could have gave the meat to the dogs. But I listen. I wouldn't even feed my dog that shit. But not the point. All right, so we got a few minutes left. What? So you got started prepping because of your neighbor, essentially.
Yeah.
Um, I would go on the limb to say, well, ask rather. Sorry, you've been prepping so long. Do you still have a bug out bag or no?
Well, I do.
Okay.
I went from hunker down, which was basically what we did with the fallout shelters in the backyard, the cinder block fallout shelters,
All right.
and then in the military we have rate restrictions when we go from one post to another. And I was giving away. I'd get stocked up and I'd give it away when I had to move. Get stocked up, give it away. I got tired of that. So while I was in the Army, I put together my bug out bag. And I worked on that. And this is one of my pet peeves. I worked on that bag. I got that the bag that I had. I started in 1980, And I mean, I was always upgrading, replacing, swapping stuff out, and everything else. When I was HR director for the electric power plant, that was a mile north of here, an hour north of here, and hour and 15 minutes, so about 90 miles. And I kept my bug out bag in the back of my car as a get home bag
Right.
in case something happened. And there was a brand new Kia Sportage, and somebody had the master trunk opener for Kia Sportages in our neighborhood, and opened my car and took all my bug out bag. I mean, I had all kinds of nice stuff in the back of the car. I had my EMT stuff, my EMT bag. I had my CERT bag. The back end was just, they got thousands of dollars worth of stuff. If I can give everybody who's watching one piece of advice, get an inventory of everything that's in your bug out bag and the actual cost, because when I filed my insurance claim, I know I lost thousands of dollars
Wow.
because I didn't have everything listed. So I got in a hurry, and I used this triangle that we learned when I was getting my doctorate in human resources development. But you have this triangle, and in this triangle, you have up top is quality, and over here is speed or convenience, and over here is cost. Now, you can only have two of those at any one time.
Right.
So if you want it cheap and good, it's going to take you a long time. If you want it cheap and quick, it's going to be expensive. So you use that theory of how are you going to acquire stuff. And I said, well, I need this quick. I need something now because I'm going to be, still going back and forth between here and Waco. And so I ordered an Echo Sigma bag that was pre-built. And, everybody says, oh, you're crazy. You're going to end up storing stuff away. You know what? I spent almost 40 years from 1980 to 2016 throwing stuff away, switching stuff out, swapping stuff, building, making it better. I'm doing the same thing with the Echo Sigma bag, but I just have a better starting point than what I had with the other bag. So, we have bug out bags for everybody in the family. I have one that I built for my daughter and my son-in-law, for my wife. Yeah, we are ready to go. That's an alternative. My primary is to hunker down.
Very good. And it's funny because you mentioned the bug out bag. I no longer keep mine in my truck. Just because I live in New York. People fucking, and you couldn't see it. With the Mariner, I had it in there, but with the new truck, I don't keep it in there because I don't trust it. So when I take long trips, if I can make it home on foot in a day, I necessarily have like a small like get home bag, like super small. But a bug out bag is what I would use if I'm traveling to, let's say, West Virginia to
Yeah.
Preparation One, or then I would use a bug out bag to get back home because that's going to sustain me a lot better. So I have essentially two bags. I just stare at one and go, all right, I'm going to need this one. But I try to do it ahead of time. I try to plan a trip at a time. I'm like, all right, if I have to walk home, it's going to take me 3 to 4 days. I'll grab the bug out bag. If it's going to take me a day, I grab the get home bag, which is a smaller bag, and it's a lot lighter, so I should be able to move a lot faster. But yeah, it sucks, man. It must have fucked your heart. Must have sank to your stomach
Oh yeah.
when you saw all that shit
And
missing.
it was totally disheartening, and you feel like you've been personally invaded. Somebody's just gotten into your personal space, and it was terrible.
It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's got to suck because like you said, you spent time building that bag. That was yours, and they took it from you. So yeah, that does suck. But with that, guys, where are we? Da, 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 da. We got a minute left. So, again, guys, listen, Cold War, man, I do appreciate you coming on here. Again, thank you for all of the information you shared with us. I definitely like to have you back on and pick your brain a little more about certain situations and things like that.
Sure. Can I ask you a real quick question?
Go ahead.
I do something that a lot of people don't like, and so I know you have a past experience as an EMT. But I strongly advocate, and I tell people, I think it's a waste of money if you buy a suture kit or a staple kit because you're in a non-sterile environment. You're adding two more puncture wounds for every suture or staple. I said, don't do that. Just get wound cleanser and either Steri-strips or butterfly strips or now there's the new Velcro, what do they call it?
The stitches, the fake
Yeah,
stitches thing. Yeah.
yeah, the fake stitches thing. I said, do that. Don't suture and don't staple. What's your opinion? Am I full of crap or?
Well, okay. So now I would say um, yes and no. Right. It depends on the environment. I wouldn't have a suture kit. Well, all right. If you know how to suture and you have the equipment to clean that wound out, then you can go ahead. But for everyday people who don't know how to suture, I would absolutely not get a suture kit. I would go with, like you said, butterfly, that new stitching thing. That's pretty cool because it goes over the
Yeah,
skin, right? That's good as well. But yeah, again, it depends. If you don't know how to suture, you could suture wrong and still leave it open. You could suture wrong and leave a nasty scar. You could suture wrong and let's say put the what you're never supposed to do is put the needle and the thread down on anything.
yeah,
You take it out of the pack, and after it's right out of the pack, you start sewing it closed. You don't put it down. Zip stitch. Thank you, Hudson Valley. That's what's called zip stitch. You don't put it. You don't put it down on anything, and things like that. But again, like Vancity yourself, you have to be trained to use that. If you don't have the training, don't bother. Again, it's like a lot of things. People tell us to buy for our bug out bags. Meanwhile, people don't have the training on the shit. Stop bleed kit.
right,
Oh, get yourself
right.
a stop bleed kit. All right. Do you know how to use everything in that stop bleed kit? No. Then either go and take a course or don't buy it. But you can't buy it, have it, and then try to use it. Like again, this everything comes down to training. And if you don't have training in it, don't buy it. And if you're gonna get training in it, buy it and learn how to use it. But
Yeah,
yeah, the suture thing, it does make sense. If you don't have training, stay away from it. Other than that, it depends. Like I learned how to suture, so I would carry a suture kit. But I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't be a Joe Schmo and get a tracheotomy kit or some shit. Like I don't know how to
right,
do that.
right.
So I would stay away from that. But yeah, I mean, that's still good advice. People they don't know how to use it. They shouldn't bother. All right. So, well, again, guys, thank you for joining me tonight, sir. It was really good to talk to somebody. Listen, again, I think I've been doing good with my guests. Everybody that's been on so far has been very informative, but I think I hate to say it, and I'm gonna say it. You've been one of my favorites so far. Uh,
Well, thank
so
you.
so I do appreciate it. I appreciate for everything you said and you brought to tonight's live stream. All right, guys. So, with that being said, do me a favor. Head over to Cold War Preppers channel. Please like and subscribe to the guy's channel. He's awesome. You're not going to regret uh, subscribing to his channel. Any last words?
Thanks, y'all.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us tonight. And for those of you, I will be on the Angry Truth in about 7 minutes. Thank you, guys.
Take care.